Hey there, it's Cassie. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I have another video, and this one is the My Favorite Things Message in a Bottle card kit. This one's no longer available, but I did do an unboxing already, and I will have all the items listed down below so that you can get a look at those, and I'll also have the unboxing down below as well. So let's get into card number one. I'm going to do a alcohol ink background, and so those are the colors that I chose to use. I've got Patina, Aquamarine, Tranquil, and then a silver mixative. I'm also going to be using some 90% isopropyl alcohol, and so I'll put the alcohol all over that Yupo paper, which is just a plastic paper. I have other videos on my channel where I do alcohol backgrounds, and I will say that when I put the Tranquil down, either I didn't shake it enough or it's just having some sort of an issue. A lot of that, it's mica powder or whatever it is in there, came out, and as you can see, it didn't spread very well. So I'm kind of trying to push it around with my marker spritzer, and it definitely had some issues. So I shook it up again thinking that would help. And I don't know. I'm not sure what the issue is. It's not an old bottle, so I'm not sure if I just maybe didn't mix all the other stuff in the past, so there's extra mica in there. But all I'm doing is just going to keep working this background, putting the colors in where I like them and where I want them. And, you know, I'll just keep doing that for a couple of minutes. And then I end up having, I don't know, a pretty cool background, but you can definitely see, and I'll show you close up, the mica bits that are stuck to the Yupo paper. I end up wiping away some of them, which really doesn't bother me, but you can see that it's like chunks on there. I don't know, it's interesting. It's an interesting look, and so I let it dry a little bit, wiped some of it away, and it wasn't a big deal. Now I'm going to take some of that silver mixative and put that right onto my glass mat. You wouldn't want to put it on any sort of porous surface or anything like that, so it will stain. But I'm just going to use a clean foam along with my mini ink blending tool, and I'm going to put this right on the stencil that came in the kit. And I'm kind of pouncing it now, but on the next wave, I drag it down. I wanted to see how this would look. I had no idea. This is like purely like we're just playing around, and I was actually, to be honest with you, a little bit nervous to do it on the background simply because I really liked the way the background already looked, and I thought I could end up ruining this, but I don't. I think it looks kind of cool. I don't know if I'll do it in the future, but it's an option, so you can always you know, do things like this, and don't worry about your stencil because you can clean that off with a little bit of that isopropyl alcohol. Not a big deal. I mean, you wouldn't want to do it on any regular paper. That paper would be ruined, but yeah, this works out. I think it looks kind of cool. As always, when you are using alcohol inks, make sure you're doing it in a ventilated area. Okay, I'm going to pull out my Wonky stitched circle die, and I'm going to run this through my die cutting machine. I did it on the side of the paper so that I could save as much of that paper, the leftover, as possible, and maybe use it for something else. And so I do have like a straight line on there. And then I'm also going to take the message in a bottle die that came in the kit, and I'm going to run that through my die cutting machine, and I'm going to work on making the corks. Now these corks for all these bottles I'm going to use on all the bottles in my cards. So I just have a piece of watercolor paper, and I am doing some ink smooshing. And that first color is Vintage Photo Distress Oxide ink, and I'm drying my paper in between each of my layers. That's the cool thing about Distress Oxides, is that they layer up pretty nicely. And so this next color is Ground Espresso. So I'm doing the same thing, and you'll see that you can see that Vintage Photo underneath, and that Ground Espresso sits on top, and that's how it looks all dry with all the different layers that I did. And I'll run that through several times. I'm going to do my sentiment, and so my sentiment is being stamped using Versify and Claire Nocturne ink onto some of that red cardstock that came in the kit. And I'm going to do this for my next sentiment. I'm doing some second and third generation stamping. So all that means is I'll ink up my stamp one time, and then I'll stamp, stamp, stamp without re-inking it any of those times. That little sentiment that said, "Here's a hug," comes from the Little Love Notes, and I'm using the Little Notes Sentiment Strips die to cut that out. And then here's how I'm going to put together my shaker. I'm sure there's an easier way, but I am just cutting some copy paper to be bigger than the die that I just used. And I'm going to glue that to that copy paper. I didn't want anything that was too thick. And then this way it'll be a little bit easier to adhere to the back. And then I am going to just go ahead and adhere my little message right to the inside. I don't do that with the others, but this one I do for sure. And now we're going to get ready to start adhering the actual shaker parts. And this is going to be the same for all of the shakers. I use the 1/8 inch score tape all around the edge of my shaker pouch. I'm going to do that for every one of the cards that I end up making today. So I won't show you all of them. It's pretty redundant, and it's, you know, obviously it's going to be the same. So I just put that 1/8 inch score tape all the way around, making sure that I have covered it, the side, and then I'll just peel off all that release paper, which, you know, there's a lot of it. And then I'm going to stick it down, and then I'll put my paper right on top of that, and then just make sure that that's adhered really well. I'm going to use some 1/2 inch score tape this time, just all around my bottle. When you're making shaker cards, you just want to make sure that you're using some good strong adhesives for all your parts, because, you know, depending on what you use, for sure, you don't want any of those bits to come out of there. Okay, so now we're going to get ready to put down our stuff. And what I'm using is the Nuvo Diamond Harlequin Pure Sheen Confetti. And I'm just using the Nuvo, or the tonic spoon, to put that down onto my piece. I figured this was the easier way to do it. And then I'll peel off all the release paper on my front piece, and then I'm going to very carefully adhere this down to my shaker piece. And there is some static electricity, so it does cause some issues, and thankfully I did this on my glass mat because it did stick to the glass mat, but there you go. Now this is ready to adhere to my card base, which is just some of the craft cardstock that came in the kit. So I'll adhere that down with some Nuvo Deluxe glue. And then I am also going to put that cork right on the top. I saw the design team do some really cool stuff. Like, they cut a slit in it in the top of the shaker, and they were able to put the cork in that way. I thought that was really cool. But I just went ahead and adhered it right to the top. And then I'll adhere my sentiment strip to my piece using that same Nuvo Deluxe glue. And then as a final bit of embellishment, I'm going to grab some Nuvo Metallic Ivory Seashell drops, and then I'll put a few drops of that, and then I'll tap those down to kind of flatten them out just a little bit, make them look a little bit more like enamel dots, and then that's going to finish off our first shaker. The first one's always the roughest, right? The rest are just easy peasy from here on out. For card number 2, I am going to do one of my all-time favorite techniques, which is some ink smushing. And I am doing this on my waffle flower media mat. I know earlier I did it just on a tonic mat, and those work great too, but I love my waffle flower media mat because it just works so well for this. And so I've put down 3 colors. That first color was, the lighter color was Tumbled Glass, then Broken China, and then Mermaid Lagoon. And I'm kind of trying to keep them in that centralized location. So I'm trying to just mostly keep that Tumbled Glass towards that upper area, and then have the darker colors go down. And what I'm doing in between, if you've never seen ink smushing, is I just spritzed that with water. Then I smush my paper, which is a watercolor paper, right into the color. And then I'll dry it in between and pick up more bits of it, because these are distress oxides and they layer so beautifully on top of each other. They end up with like this chalky finish when they're all dry. And then when I'm kind of happy with that, I'm going to go through with just a little bit more water and a paintbrush and do some splattering just for more texture. I'll spritz some water on there using my Distress water sprayer, kind of dab that up with my microfiber cloth, and then heat that in between as well. And that'll cause the water droplets to be even more intense. And just look at all the texture that's on that background. It's actually really pretty incredible in my opinion. I just love it. Now, I'm not sure if I mentioned what this stencil is called. This is called the Wavemaker stencil. And I'm going to bring in one of my brushes along with some chipped sapphire distress oxide. And I am going to layer that on top, just kind of blending down. And I'm really enjoying the look that this is giving. So that intense color, that darker intense color, and I'm not really pushing that hard because I don't want it to be too dark. That's the thing about stencils, at least for me. I know that I'm very heavy-handed with most of my mediums, and it seems like I feel like I'm not going very dark, and then I'll pick up whatever it is I've done and I'm like, wow, that's really, really dark. So I'm trying to lighten as I go towards the top, because I just, I'm trying to have the darker, more intense color at the bottom, and then it just gets a little lighter as we go towards the top. I'm also going to go ahead and pull that color all around the edges, just because I love the way that looks as well. And I'm really thinking this might be my favorite background of all the backgrounds that I end up making today. There's just something about distress oxides and doing ink smooshing. I just love it. And all 4 of those blue colors have their own little area, and it's just so pretty. Oh, love the way that looks. So I'll clean up my mess, and then we're going to move on to doing our die cutting with the bottle. And I'm going to put 3 on there. I know I'm going big here. I just thought that background was so pretty and I wanted to put 3 on there. To run this through my die cutting machine, I actually do use a piece of scrap paper. It's usually copy paper, because that distress oxide, when you run it through your die cutting machine, will always, for some reason, transfer to my plates. And I don't want that. So I put the scratch paper on top so that if the color is going to transfer, it'll transfer to the color. Because if you put it on your plate and then let's say you go to die cut something later on, that color will then transfer to your project. I've had that happen. So I always, whenever I'm doing any sort of medium like this, will always use that scrap paper. And I'll show you, it ends up being pretty messy after I'm done doing all 3 of the die cuts on there. So there's a lot of color transferred to that. And then I'm going to go ahead and get my bottles all ready like I did before, just using that 1/8 inch score tape. Put that all around each of the edges, and then I'll peel off all the score tape on those, and I'll adhere those down to each of those areas, just pushing to make sure that they're in there pretty well. And then I'm going to also, this is, I showed this earlier, using some scrap copy paper once again. I'll just cut around those bottles. And then I'll adhere those to the scrap paper. I'll adhere the bottles to the scrap paper just with some liquid glue. I'm stamping out 2 sentiments per bottle just because I wanted to have a couple sentiments in each one. I thought that was fun. And I'm going to have those be loose in there this time around. So now that I've gotten each of my bottles ready to go and all their sentiments, I'm going to put the foam or the 1/8 inch score tape around each of the bottles. And then this is what I'm going to be using. This stuff I don't believe is around anymore. This is the Barbara Trombley's Art Glitter. It's vintage glass glitter bits, and it's in antique silver. And believe it or not, I believe I got this from one of the very first kits I ever purchased from My Favorite Things, probably a good 10 years ago. So this stuff is old, but I love it. It's so pretty, and I've barely used any of it. All right, so doing the same thing like I did before, I'll just peel off all that adhesive and attach that down that way. That's one of the easier ways that I have found to be able to do this. I know there are other ways, but for me this just works. So I'll do the exact same thing with this one. I'm leaving those sentiments in there very loosely. I'll grab the tape and I'll put that around the bottle that I want to use, making sure that I don't have any gaps in the tape because I don't want that glitter or the glass glitter to go anywhere. Using my tonic spoon, I'll put that glitter back in to one of the bottles, remove all the release paper of the one I'm planning to use, and then I will just set that down on top of the bottle, making sure that I matched each of these bottles up with exactly where they came from. And pardon my head, but then I'll do that with the third one, the exact same thing. And then we'll be ready to adhere this to our card base. I'm just going to use some liquid glue this time. You could use a dry glue if you chose to, but this is what I had handy and it works just fine. And I love that background. Oh my goodness. So I did put the corks down using the same glue that I've been using, but I knew it needed a pop of color. So I am actually going to pull in some Doodlebug. They're the Ladybug Hearts sprinkles. And I'm going to use quite a few. I'm going to be pretty liberal with it because I love the red on that blue. I just think it's so pretty. And I'll just put those all around. Like I said, being pretty liberal. And I don't know if these are still available either. I've had these for a while, but if they are, I will definitely link those in the description box down below. And I'm just using my paper piercer to pick these up and stick these down because my fingers would be really fumbly at this point. So this works out really nicely to use. You just kind of pop it under there and it sticks to your pick, and then you can set those down wherever you want them. And so that will finish off card number 2. And I love how the messages move around, and so does that glitter. So pretty. For card number 3, our background is going to be pretty simple. We're going to use that wave stencil once again, and this time we're just going to use some white pigment ink, and we're going to move that up the blue cardstock, the darker blue cardstock that came in the kit. And I'm just kind of shifting my stencil around. I'm using just the one side, and then I'll kind of think about moving to another side, but I mostly just stay with that side, and I'll kind of tip it up and down, and just to kind of see where or how I want that wave to go. But I'll just go all the way up that panel, doing that same process using that mini ink blending tool. And I had cut that paper to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. And it's at this point that I will end up grabbing out my inside and out stitched rectangle dies, and I'm going to make this a horizontal card. I just figured that would be fun. So I cut that horizontally, and then I'm also going to run my message through a bottle, or message in a bottle die over the top of that, and then take that through my die cutting machine and then set that aside. But that's how that's going to end up looking. I'll take the darker pink cardstock and I'll run another one of those stitched rectangles through, and then my card base is actually going to be that light pink cardstock. So I think I'm going to really like the way that's all going to work out. So here's another way that you can adhere without having to use like scratch paper. So what I'll do is I'll stick my panel on there where I want it to be located, glue down my bottle, and then I can move my piece away, and then I'll let that dry. I'll attach the little shaker piece like I did before. I'll stamp out my sentiment onto some of that dark pink cardstock, use my reverse tweezers, and then dip that into some alabaster embossing powder by Brutus Monroe. I stamped that with Versamark ink, and then I'm going to heat set that till that is smooth and melted. But I'm setting this up basically the same way I did before. The only difference is I went ahead and glued my little bottle piece directly to the panel that I wanted to attach it to. And so then I'll stick that on there. And then I'll take those same glass bits. I am loving that glass glitter, so I'm going to use these for this card and the next card as well. I just have so many of them, and I really love the way they look. And then I'm going to attach my panel down. This time I'm using liquid glue. You just want to make sure that you're using a glue that is a very good secure glue, and this Nuvo Deluxe is a very good glue for that. Because you're going to need to be able to let it sit for a second so that you can let it dry. You don't want this, you don't want to start just shaking like crazy, otherwise you're going to have bits everywhere, especially if you're using tiny little glitter like I am. And then I'll attach that down to my card base. And then now I'm kind of practicing making some little hearts using the Nuvo Simply White. And to do that, as you'll see, I'm just starting my drop and pulling it down. And then they meet in the center, and I'll just put 5 of those down, and then I'll attach my cork, and then that's actually going to finish off card number 3. So love the way that one turned out too. Very fun, different. Card number 4 is an easy one, doing basically the same thing. I just wanted to try using a couple of the sentiments in a different way. So I am going to run some of that primitive cream cardstock through my die cutting machine with the stitched rectangle inside out dies. And then I'm going to pull in the wave stencil, the Wave Maker stencil, along with some Distress Oxide ink in the color Salty Ocean. It just seemed fitting. I mean, Salty Ocean, so of course, right? So I'll grab one of my Vivas Beauty brushes, and then I'm going to run that along the stencil, just kind of pulling the color down a little bit. Flipping my stencil around, I'm going to end up using 3 of the sides. I don't use one of them because it's a little bit bigger wave than what I was looking for this time around, but I will use all 3 sides, and I'm going to go almost all the way to the top. I didn't want this to look like it's a pure ocean background. I wanted it to be ocean with a little bit of sky maybe, and so I'm just going to pull that color up a couple more because I wanted my bottle to fit in there nicely. And then when I'm happy with that, I'll clean off my stencil, and then I'll run that die through my die cutting machine. And then I'll get ready to stamp my sentiments. So I did stamp out, or I pulled out 3 of those sentiment strips. Once again, that's from the Little Notes sentiment strip die, which is cool because it does cut out 3 of those. And then I'll pull out 3 sentiments. I'm going to pull out, like I said, 3 sentiments. That first one, I'll ink it up after I've put my magic powder bag on there pretty essential when you're doing some embossing, so I want to make sure I don't get embossing powder where I don't want it. I'll ink it up with the Versamark ink, and then I'm going to stamp that sentiment all the way to the far right. And then it says, "Here's to us," and the next one says, "Forever Friends." And I'm going to do the same thing with it, stamping it on that far right-hand side of the die, dipping that into the embossing powder. And then the third sentiment just says, "Miss your face," and then I'm going to stamp that in the center again. So that one will be inside the bottle, the other two will be outside the bottle. And I'm going to have to use my reverse tweezers in this case once again because I don't want to burn my fingers. So I will heat set all those and then once again put it all together the way I have in the past. And I am going to use some scratch paper for this one, so I did adhere my bottle down to the scratch paper, once again using the 1/8" score tape all the way around. And then I'm going to put my message inside of my bottle. If I had been thinking, I could have done it the way I did the last bottle, but I wasn't. I had already adhered my shaker pouch to the inside, so it's not going to work in that case. And then I'll grab the bits once again along with that spoon, which really is essential when you're talking about a small area like this. I don't know how else I could do it other than maybe if you had a piece of paper that you kind of scrunch up, you could do it that way. And then I'll adhere my piece down and then trim off the excess of that scratch paper. And then I'm going to go ahead and start adhering those sentiments to the top. So I did put some foam tape on the back of them, and I'm lining this up on my glass mat. And then this one's going to go out a little bit further, which I kind of like. And then I'll turn that over and cut off the excess. And then I'm going to use some of my liquid glue to adhere that down to my card base after I adhere the cork to my bottle. And that card base is just some of that Neenah Desert Storm cardstock. Love how that looks. It's so fun. And that's actually going to finish off our 4th card. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at all 4 cards that I made today. I know they're all obviously very similar. The whole concept is similar, but I tried to show you different ways you could make backgrounds. I would love to know if you have a favorite in these cards that I made. And if you do, please leave that down in the comment section. I love hearing what you guys think of the cards I make and what you think of this kit even. And if you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And I will see you very soon in the next video. Bye, everyone.